Now I get the pleasure of introducing our spiritual mother, Maureen Muldoon. Maureen speaks poetry that just drops in from divine intelligence, and it gifts us all with her humor and her laughter and her wisdom. And she is a friend to all of us, and she is a humble student and teacher of God. And I'm just so honored to introduce her today, to bring her wisdom and all of that divine intelligence that just flows through her to bless us all today. So, Maureen, take it away, girl.
Thanks, Regina. It's so great to be here on this weekend. This was always one of my most favorite holidays, 4th of July. You know, we'd sit out on some lawn and watch the fireworks, and it seemed like everyone in the world was staring at the sky and saying, ooh, ah. And I just remember, like, how magnificent that felt. It felt like better than any sermon I'd ever gone to, that we were all lifting our chins to the sky and saying, ooh, ah. And imagine what God saw in that moment. So maybe tonight, maybe today, maybe the next time you see fireworks, you'll think about those magnificent fireworks that are actually just a symbol of God, and how we can be oohed and awed by the divinity that lives around us and within us. So, we're going to be talking about this series, this whole series for the month of July. It is called Roots and Wings. And I just love how the Holy Spirit inspires us to have these conversations, because this July I'll be celebrating 15 years of being a spiritual practitioner. It seems like it was just yesterday when I was, taking my oral exams and passing my tests, and I had no idea what I was up for or in for, but I just knew that I was thirsty for knowing my own spiritual authority and knowing God. And it's also my 10-year anniversary for being a minister of this community. Again, I had no idea what I was in for. But my first sermon that I gave at Speakeasy, which at the time was called Spiritual Sanctuary, the title was Let It Be. That was the title of the sermon. And it's still a pretty prevalent teaching in my own medicine bag. It's not always easy to do, to let things be. New thought comes into our consciousness, into our awareness, and instead of letting it be, instead of welcoming it in, we sort of fight it and fixate on it and fear it. And so sometimes when we talk about our roots and our wings and new thought, we can see the awkward arrival of our consciousness, and the awkward arrival of how our consciousness expands. And this is awkward only because we are awkward with it, only because we don't know how to let it be. Megan Lastman told me a story this morning about how she had this opportunity to sort of, wrestle with something, and then she learned how to let it be. And gosh, when we learn how to do that, it's magnificent. My own roots and wings that I honor, as I came up through Catholicism and then promptly into 12 step. I was in 12 step before I could even take a legal drink. uh, Dabbled in Buddhism, and my first major book that I read at 16 or 17 was Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. I just thought, oh my gosh, this new thought washed over me. And I couldn't believe that someone else had thought the thoughts that I was thinking. And Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about that in his Self-Reliance essay, which we'll tap into a little bit today. And then, of course, I found my way to New Thought, and then to A Course in Miracles. And these are just some of the streams of thoughts, of philosophies that you will find here at Speakeasy in the conversations. These are our roots. And knowing our roots helps us to stay steady in the storms of life and anchor down into our purpose. And it gives us a sense of history and our belonging and the place to move from. This is what our roots can do for us. And we want to be able to reach past those roots and grow, because growth is a way that we honor our roots. Like, think about when children leave their parents. Like, their parents want them to grow and move into new territories that they haven't been to yet. And so we have this idea of roots and wings. This month, we're honoring the roots of New Thought, the teachings, the teachers that have inspired our community and its members. We'll also be honoring our wings, and the wings are the places where we hope to go and grow. consciously and otherwise. And during this time, I invite you to contemplate your own roots and wings. The roots seek water and they reach into the earth. And the branches, they seek light and they reach into the heavens. And as the roots seek to hold on to this moment and also knows that it needs to have that flow of water, the fresh water is the medicine for the roots to grow. And as your consciousness reaches into the heavens, the stars and the suns and the moons, that light sheds clarity in the mystery. Because again, when you send your children off to the places you haven't been, it's like kind of scary to step into the unknown. But the awareness of the fact that we are always surrounded by light and teachers of light, that we can begin to tread these mysteries without too much fear. So water and light are two elements that support our health, our spiritual health. And we live on the shoulders of these great teachers who have come before us, who have brought us fresh water, who have brought us healing light, and whose teachings are still flowing in our consciousness, even if they've been crucified. You know, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the teachings of Anne Hutchinson, also martyred for her beliefs, but her teachings are still alive. So, like them, we're asked to go beyond, what we know and grow, to root into the moment, to reach into the mystery, to root into the moment, to reach into the mystery, to root into the moment, to reach into the mystery, to root into the moment of God, to reach into the mystery of God. That's not always something that's supported, because many times we get into these philosophies or theologies and we say, this is where the buck stops here. These are the 10 commandments, or this is the way you do this, and don't question it. Because to question would mean to take it further. Funny enough, the man who was the founder of Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, he actually said, listen, this philosophy is open at the top. What did that mean? Basically, he was saying, I got you this far. I hope you take it further. I think that's such a generous thing to say. Jesus said the same thing. He said, you think I'm great? Great. This and greater things will you do. I think that's really generous. So we as a community live on the shoulders of these many great teachers. Again, 12-step, Science of Mind, a whole army of incredible and inspired teachers, authors, spiritual pioneers who have, stepped into this mystery and they've brought back some wisdom for us. So during this month, we're going to uncover the bold and beautiful teachings of many who have dared to question the status quo and lean into a more present and personalized relationship with God, because that's where you get the fresh water. You can find information, inspiration in books, but they all turn us back into our own internal teacher. So we'll attempt to trace that thread of new thought from teachers and preachers like Anne Hutchinson. Can't believe I forgot her name. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Thomas Treward, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Mary Baker Eddy, similar thought systems from Paramahansa Yogananda, from Bill W., and how we have these more modern versions of these teachers like Helen Schuckman and Louise Hay and Ram Dass and Mickey Singer and Byron Katie and Marianne Williamson as extensions of these teachings, and how they extend and embody these teachings, and then, of course, how you are called to extend and embody these teachings even further. So I invite you during this month not to tread on the surface of this water, of this content, of this current conversation, but instead to wade in deeper yourself and to lean into your own search, to seek your own water. And you can do that through picking up any one of these teachers who you may not be familiar with and begin to study it. Begin to look into their teachings. I mean, everything is available on Google now. It's incredible, the resources that we have available to us. Not just so that you can have a greater understanding of the new thought philosophy and theologies that have tainted and our current zeitgeist, but so that you can be a part of the conversation, so that you can say, this is what I learned about Mary Baker Eddy. This is what I learned about Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is what I know about Bill W. So you can be part of the conversation. So Next week, we're going to be looking at the ancient spiritual teachings of Ireland. And we have this wonderful teacher, Ona, who's coming. She's a powerful teacher. Then we have the teachings of Bill W. Megan Lastman is going to help us with that conversation. We're going to be looking at Emma Curtis Hopkins. We're going to be looking at Emerson with Todd Fink, who's going to be back. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a transcendentalist, and the idea of transcendentalism was this idyllic philosophy, and it was a social movement which was developed in New England around 1836, and in reaction to the puritanical thought systems that were coming to us. And basically, it said that God was in and accessible in all things. This was a new thought at the time, that God was in and accessible in all things. It's interesting to think that that was once a new thought. And it is also interesting to think that every time that thought comes to us, it does feel like fresh baked bread. It's like, oh, right, God is in this. I am that I am. It still feels like a new thought in some ways. And some of the famous transcendentalists were, well, Ralph Waldo Emerson and David Thoreau. And there was a philosophy that basically said that people are innately good and can be trusted. We don't have that today. Sometimes it feels like we're moving backwards. We have this innate feeling that people are basically bad and cannot be trusted. So even though this is not a new thought, it hasn't fully anchored into our consciousness just yet. Emerson wrote this article. Well, he wrote many articles, many books, but he's known for an article called Self-Reliance. And his major themes were that each individual is to avoid conformity and false consistency and follow his own instinct and ritual. So to avoid conformity and ritualistic practices and begin to cut your own path. To begin to cut your own path. That's a dangerous teaching. His most popular piece of writing, like I said, was Self-Reliance. And as a spiritual practitioner, there's many who are here who went through that program. You had to read Self-Reliance. You had to study it. And it's an essay that I encourage you to check out and read. But here's a section of it that I think you might enjoy. In it, he says, to believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that's genius. So to trust your thought, that's where genius comes from. He goes on to say, to speak your latent convictions, and it shall be the universal sense, for the inmost in due time becomes the outmost. So basically he's saying, when you have that new thought, and you find conviction around it, even if it's something you've never heard before, speak it, because your inmost will become your outmost. And it goes on to say, and our first thought is rendered back to us by the trumpets of the last judgment. Basically, your word is your wand. So you speak out your word, and it will return to you. It goes on to say, familiar as the voice of the mind is to each, the highest merit we ascribe to Moses, to Plato, to Milton, is that they sat at not books and traditions and spoke not what men, but what they thought. So he's saying that these high thinkers didn't get this high vibe understanding from books or from other men, but instead from an internal well. A man should learn to detect and watch the gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. So he's literally saying to us, be self-reliant with a capital S. Like you will study Shakespeare and Course in Miracles, but take that to your internal teacher and check in to make sure that those philosophies, theologies, they actually sit well with your soul. He goes on to say, like, even though these flashes of brilliance go by us, we seem to anchor them more in teachers than in our own truth. He says, yet he dismisses without notice his thoughts because they're his. So he's saying, like, you might have these brilliant thoughts and you might think, oh, those are just my silly old thoughts. Those aren't real because nobody else is saying those thoughts, so they can't be true. So let me dismiss my own thoughts. He's saying basically don't do that, even though that's what we tend to do. And he goes on to say, in every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Great works of art have no more affecting lesson on us than this. They teach us to abide by our spontaneous impression with good-humored inflexibility than most when the whole cry of voices on the other side. So basically he's saying like these works of art that you come across, like A Course in Miracles, which feels like a work of art, like the 12 Step, which feels like a work of art, like a Picasso, like a moment of truth, like a Oprah Winfrey having a great guest and you're going, oh yeah, that's true. The aha moments. When you come across those things, those are actually your own thoughts that return to you from an alien hand. Because you say, I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. And now the external is telling me what I knew on the internal, that I wasn't maybe brave enough to speak because I'm more invested in being socially than self-reliant. I just think this stuff is really good. That's why I'm passionate about it. So then he goes on to say, else tomorrow a stranger will say with masterly good sense precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our own opinions from another. So he's basically saying, like, if you don't step into your own brilliance, write the book, sing the songs, write the sermons, you're going to be very likely stuck as a freaking audience member to your own genius, and you're going to watch somebody else penning the books you're supposed to write, singing the songs you're supposed to sing. So don't do that. This is what he's saying. So don't do that. Don't rely on books and bards and sages. Rely on self, capital S, self. Again, a very dangerous teaching. Other concepts of this philosophy are people are at their best when they truly are self-reliant, he says, and independent. So it's interesting for me to have this conversation on independence around Independence Day. When we are encouraged to be free thinkers, when we are encouraged to be unharnessed by doctrine of dead men, we begin to bake fresh baked bread. That's what you're up for. And because transcendentalists saw God in all things, they saw heaven in the everyday. And as opposed to just a hopeful one day I'll get to heaven, they saw it in the everyday. This was what the transcendentalists believed. These are the forerunners of New Thought. And we also hear this even from even more ancient teachings, like Jesus Christ, when he gives us the prayer, our Father, who art in heaven, says, like, on earth as it is in heaven. Like, you don't have to wait till you die to get to heaven. Like, let's bring that to earth. Let's practice that on the daily. So we acknowledge that this moment can be heavenly, can be harmonious. So from these thought systems, these other philosophies and theologies were sprung, like Quaker, like Unitarianism, like the Unity Church. And these non-dualistic teachings said that God is essentially good and in all things, and that God lives beneath all forms. So even in A Course in Miracles, we see the same theme, which says, when you call upon a brother, it's not his body that you make appeal. His true identity is hidden from you by what you believe he really is. His body makes a response to what you call him, for his mind consents to take the name that you have given him as his own, and thus his unity is twice denied. For you perceive him separate from you, and he accepts his separate name as his. But this thought system, is telling us, like, God is in all things. Your brother is Christ. When will we be bold enough to say Christ? When we will be bold enough to recognize Christ in all things as all things? Again, a very dangerous statement. This thought system is dangerous because if man saw himself as Christ and fully understood his direct communication with his divinity, there would be no way to control him. And what would happen to original sin and all that guilt that helps us to live in very small and sequestered ways? So Anne Hutchinson was one such free thinker, and she was born in 1591. She was an influential spiritual teacher, and she challenged the doctrine of the day. And it was very uncommon for a woman to challenge the doctrine of the day. She was deeply imbued with religious thought as a young child. Her father was actually a minister. And she came to mistrust the Church of England, who didn't seem to be acting in accordance with the principles. And so her father, who was a minister, also, felt this way. In fact, when she was born, he was in prison. He was in prison for questioning the church. They had locked him up a couple times. And but he was seems like a great guy. He insisted that his daughter be equally educated as any other man. so different, so cutting edge, so new thought, right? She begins to seek different water and seek fresh water and seek new water, not from the doctrine of the day, not from the doctrine of dead men, but from the things that are in alignment with her truth and her soul. And she follows this minister, John Cotton, who preaches that mercy is preordained by God, and not by the court and not by the church, but God, that God is merciful, which is interesting because this way the story ends, Cotton turns out to be not very merciful at all. So Cotton gets chased out of England due to his teachings that were causing dissent from the English church. Anne decides to follow him when she's 43. In 1634, she comes over to Boston with her family, which at the time included 10 children. She had 10 children, and she dodges the British authority and she joins Cotton in Boston. And she's married to this guy, William. And William Hutchinson, he rises to prominence in Boston. He becomes one of the magistracy, and Anne joins groups of women, and they work together, I get this, as healers, treating illnesses and assisting in childbirth. So she's a midwife, and she's working very intimately with women healers. And it's during her involvement with this healing group that Anne develops this religious philosophy that becomes the focus of her preaching. She becomes a preacher. And again, this is in the 1500s, the 1600s, so female preachers were like not a thing. But Anne, being a midwife, she had this almost immediate following of women because these women who she midwife trusted her with their lives, which is a beautiful thing, and the lives of their children. And so she is an oddball, so she's educated, she's an honored spiritual woman, and she is causing a bit of a stir. Her belief system is she basically believes and teaches that heaven was attainable to anyone who worshiped God directly through personal connection. Sound familiar? Anne also preached that behavior and therefore sin did not actually affect whether a person went to heaven. What? That God was going to love you no matter what you did? Very radical. These beliefs were in direct violation to the current doctrine. So Hutchinson continues to invite women to her home to discuss the recent sermons that are being delivered and other religious matters. And eventually these become larger groups, like 60 and more people. And she begins to teach twice a week, and they gather to discuss and listen to her spiritual explanations and her elaborations. And they have these discussions, these communal discussions, not too far from what we're doing right now. But she also begins to get criticism, and she begins to give her own views as well. And she begins to espouse on the intuition of spirit that dwells within each of us, but that actually you're a good person because you're innately good. So her followings begin to include men. She begins to get even more and more popular. And she continues to challenge the teachings of the day with these new thoughts. But again, like, new thoughts are scary for us. We want to fight new thoughts with everything we have because we're scared of them. So she's teaching these Christian philosophies, but in a more inclusive way. Then she becomes popular for her own preaching, and then her preacher, Cotton, turns against her. And she's taken to court for heresy. And she's taken to court while she's pregnant, actually, with her 11th child. And the Cotton and the members of law decide that they need to send in spies to watch her teach so they can find ways to take her down. She's pregnant and she comes to the court, and at the end of June she has a stillbirth, and the baby is born pretty deformed, probably from all the stress she's put under. And Cotton begins to spread rumors that Anne has given birth to a demon. That's crazy. And preaches that this, and preaches, her minister preaches against her that this child's deformities are proof that God doesn't love her and that God's punishing her. So that was not a new thought. That was a thought that actually was very vibrant at that time, that God was vindictive and that God was angry and that God would smite you. Can you imagine living in the times when God was feared like that? And God must be thinking, like, how did I get such bad PR? So anyway, so this Defamation went beyond her own labor. One minister claimed that Hutchinson actually, they blew up this rumor. They said not only was her baby deformed, but she has never delivered a normal baby, and that all the babies that she delivered were monsters. Why? What the hell? First of all, she was asked to leave the colony, so she went to live on this Native American territory. And after one summer in 1643, Anne's family was attacked by Native American Sewanee warriors at their home. 15 people, including Anne, were axed to death, their bodies burned, and this was blamed on the natives. But I just had, like, when I was reading the story, it just didn't feel right because of the very end of the story. So at this point of the story, when I'm writing this out, when I'm looking into this history of this woman, at this point of the story, I was called by Regina. She called me this morning. She didn't know that why she was calling me. She just felt the pressure that she was supposed to call me. And she called me and she said, I don't know why I'm bothering you. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm writing my sermon. And she said, well, I'm supposed to call you and pull a card. And I was like, well, okay. And so she pulled a card for me. I'm going to have her read that for you. But what I wanted to say before she reads this card is that when we look at and honor our roots, we might see how some ideas and thoughts in teachers like Christ, like Anne, these teachers who attempt to bring in fresh water, are a bit ahead of their time. And that these new thoughts are so new that it's hard for us to digest them. But that truth never dies. So Regina pulled this card for us, for me, for you, for Anne Hutchinson. And I'm going to ask her to read it to you, and then I'm going to close the sermon with a short end of Anne's story. I'll pass it to you, Regina.
Okay, yeah. So this card is from the African Goddess Rising deck, which I actually purchased in honor of the Unity event this in August, just to learn more about the African goddesses. So this card is called Mubaya Nahanda, and she is the goddess of radical rebirth. Her temple is the ancestors, and her element is air. So born around 1840, Sharwe Nyakasikana channeled Mohandoro, an ancient royal lion spirit named Nahanda, who has been incarnated by revolutionary Shona woman for the last 500 years. Heralded as Mubaya Nahanda, which means grandmother Nahanda, this great ancestress was a healer who declared war against colonial occupation. Her guidance is this: yes, you can. Stop the struggle. You can choose at any moment to start over and be reborn. Like the sun, you rise and rise again. And the embodiment is dust yourself off, move forward, and go for it again. Life is about transition and change. You will fall on your face, change your mind, and need to make a comeback again and again. Release the idea that you messed up if things aren't perfect. Stop waiting to be ready. Make new choices and decisions. And her goddess declaration is, still I rise.
Thanks, Regina. So the interesting part of the story of Anne Hutchinson, and Dove put it in the chat already, but at the time of the attack on this family, Anne's 9-year-old daughter, Susan, was out picking berries she hid behind a boulder, and she was saved, but she was taken in by the Sewanee tribe, and she was adopted by the chief. And then chief was Wampage, who later named himself Annie Hook, which means Anne's honor. So he named himself after the mother of this daughter. I think that's interesting to think of a tribe going in and killing this family, adopting the daughter, and then having the chief name himself after this woman. So I don't know that we have the full story in history. That's all I'll say about that. So Susan remains with the tribe. The daughter, Anne's daughter, remains with the tribe for another 9 years. Eventually, she returns to Boston. She marries a settler there. And in memory of Anne Hutchinson, and Wampage, who's the chief who named himself after her, a neighboring parcel of land was given the name Anne Hoch, which means, in honor of Anne. And the adjacent river to this parcel of land was christened the Hutchinson River, later joined by the major New York City area highway next to it called the Hutchinson River Parkway. So if you know or lived anywhere near New York, you know that this is a substantial byway and a substantial river. The river still flows today. the truth still flows today. These are our roots. Sometimes in contemplating our roots and looking back into our roots, we get to have a reinterpretation of the story. We get to see, where we come from, where we stand, and whose shoulders we stand on. These are also our wings. Where are we going to take this philosophy, these theologies? Where are we going to take the principle that God dwells within each of us? It's no longer a new thought, but it can take us to new awarenesses. So still she rolls this river, and still she rises this river, and God is good in all of it. And that's the word.
Beautiful, Maureen. Thank you so much. Such a intriguing story and so many great wisdoms in there. So now it's time for the truly unique experience of Speakeasy Sunday service. It's our community conversation. And this is where we invite you to speak easily, find your voice and your truth, share your thoughts, inspirations, awarenesses, and your questions. Maureen, I really wanted to, one of the things that I took away was when you said, take the philosophies to your internal teacher to get your own truth. That is like, preach. Yes, we need to take it to our internal teacher and really get clear on what this truth is for us.
I was also really inspired to that concept of to thine own self be true. And lots of oohs and ahs in the word today, Maureen. What was really fun for me to think about was the idea of new thought and that the title of new thought. And I want to pay homage to the indigenous tribes because their entire philosophy is pantheism, right? It is that God is everywhere. And so I had the fun thought that I had is that Ralph Waldo Emerson, it probably wasn't a new thought. It was probably thought that came from the indigenous tribes and in that shared field of oneness that we're often not aware of. That thought, that philosophy could have just come right into his spirit and into his mind.
Well,
right?
yeah,
Not
the
exactly
original.
new in that way.
Well, it's not even new to them because the first cause is God. So the first cause of God is always truth, and it will be branded, hijacked, contained by this thought or this thought or this thought of, philosophy, theology, way of being. But the truth is the truth is the truth, no matter what you name it, what you call it, how you quiet it, so Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote this idea of self-reliance because he went into the forest by himself and hugged the same trees that indigenous people hugged. So they all got that same gospel. He got the gospel of the leaves and the gospel of the dirt and the gospel of the birds. And those kind of gospels come without dogma and without agenda. The birds are not trying to control us. Dogs are not, earth is not trying to control us. It lets us be, so yeah, absolutely. It's the same thought. It's not new. It's just, are we listening to that same thought,
Yeah.
I love that, Liz.
It's not my thought or your thought. It's one thought. It's spirit. It's oneness. It's beautiful.
Thanks, Liz. And thanks for that meditation. Hi, Gigi.
Hi, good morning. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the reminder that it's my birthright to use my voice. And it's also my responsibility, and that I need to set aside fear, which also oftentimes keeps me quiet. I think about Kevin in Home Alone when he shouts out, "I'm not afraid anymore." I'm hoping to take that with me. It sounds really good right now. But, given what's happening in my external world right now, I often feel like I keep quiet for fear of judgment and what the world, may judge me for whatever my truth is. But the fact of the matter is, given what's going on now, my new mantra is silence no more. And just like your prayer, Maureen, for the miracle worker, it's not just for my good. It's
Yeah.
for good, the good of people who can't speak up for themselves, who aren't there yet, who are like I was before you started talking today. So I just want to say thank you, and yeah, it's been a real great experience
Hmm.
being here this morning and knowing that what God has given me inside needs to be put out there. So
Yeah.
bless you and thank you.
Well, thank you, Gigi. And you are like me in that, like, once I find my voice, I'm like, silence no more. But I have to remind myself that there is a good thing about balance. Like, sometimes it's important to have silence, and then what to speak and what to say. Because here's the thing that happened to Anne Hutchinson is, I think she was, and of course we only have the history that's written, which isn't always the truth. It's just the history that's written. And for generations that did not empower women to hold the pen, we're not going to get always a balanced history. That's all I'll say about that. But the history that's written is that, during this time of persecution, where they were like ostracizing her and finding ways to drive her out, um, she was like, okay, I speak for God, and God's going to ruin Boston, and it's going to ruin Massachusetts. And I imagine that maybe wasn't her, like, after you're persecuted, you're like, screw you guys, you're all going to go to hell. Probably was her exit sermon. And then she meets up with this experience. So it's like, we're all not saints and we're all not sinners. Like, there's something within each of us that is a prophet, and is also a pedestrian, and we get to sort of make peace with that, so that we can, so we can be compassionate around the human experience.
Yeah, which I think is just speaks volumes to why it's so important to have that connection with
Mhm.
that voice within.
Yes.
You go to Holy Spirit, am I supposed to say this?
Yes.
Does this have to come out of my mouth? And let me tell you, I struggled with that just by raising my hand today. And I got
Mm.
the yes, just like Regina, had the vision and the voice to pull that card today, which
Yes.
spoke to all of us. So I thank you.
I know, and I appreciate that, Jeannie, because I really appreciate your voice. You specifically, I appreciate your voice. I could listen to you read the dictionary, so I appreciate your moving through those tough waters of resistance, and then getting to self-reliance. And I know that you're a practitioner, and I know you've probably read this essay, Self-Reliance by Emerson, and read it again, man. It's just such a good one. So thanks for sharing. Amber, hi, good morning.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for sharing today. I just wanted to say this, like, linked up with something else I heard. I don't know if it was this week or last week, but how more than ever we aren't spending time with our own thoughts because we have so much entertainment and so much uh, information. It's super easy to not be alone ever, and that we're starting to just regurgitate other people's opinions instead of connecting to that source and coming up with our own. And so I think this was a really good reminder to sit with your own thoughts and come up with your own genius instead of slightly shift somebody else's, and then no new genius comes through. So I think it was a good reminder.
Yeah, and not only are we just regurgitating, but we're just regurgitating sound bites. Like, we don't even give ourselves the permission to tell the whole or know the whole story. Gary Marshall, we made this quote in the Maiden Voyage program this week, is like, his philosophy was like, listen to the other person's story. Listen to the other person's whole story. Listen to the other person's whole story first. So, like, not just to absorb, but to allow yourself to really, because I hear people say things and I'll say, what is that true? And they'll go, well, I saw it on Facebook, or so and so said. And I'm like, well, go and investigate it, man. Like, get on down to it. Like, don't be a spouter of, like, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Like, we don't need any more henny pennies. We need more, ministers and preachers that have actually put some thought into and stepped into that deeper river of their soul, and the genius lives there. So yes, and yes, and yes.
Beautiful. I went to Concord, Massachusetts last summer, and I'd never been there. I went to school in Boston, but I'd never gone to Concord. And a friend of mine had a house that we got to stay at and take our kids on a college tour. And I just loved, Maureen, how you pulled all these brilliant thinkers into one talk today. Just got my pen flowing, and some other things that I read this morning, and just reminding me, and what someone else just shared about, all this intake of information that we are constantly, barraged with. And if we don't root down in something and anchor down in something, which is really ourself. And I just love how sometimes I just feel like all these teachers are kind of teaching the same thing in a different way, and just reminding us that it was a new thought back when these transcendentalists, came into play. And it was really brilliant. And it really got me off on the right step today. And I read something this morning, and also the 12 steps, that's such a, it's becoming a very powerful thing for me. And I read something in a daily reader this morning about stumbling blocks, turning them into stepping stones. And it just really is helping me. So I'm sharing that with everybody too, that stumbling blocks can be stepping stones towards a more anchored, rooted place of thought to self.
Yes, 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 yes. It's funny because, we're doing this whole series on roots and wings. And, sometimes when you study a philosophy or theology, you think everybody knows it. You know what I mean? You think, you have the error of sometimes thinking because I know it, you know it. And so it's really nice to go back and retread old stories and histories and philosophies and, founding thoughts and, spiritual pioneers, and to refresh that, because it can, knowing our history can give us appreciation, and on this weekend where we are, celebrating liberation, is like, wisdom is knowledge. And then we get to take it in from the consciousness that we're at now, and from the consciousness that we're at now, we might see something totally different that we hadn't seen the first time we ran through those teachings. And as an example, I was sitting here just in the last 2 days thinking about these founding thoughts, 12 step and transcendentalism, and I didn't really know about Anne Hutchinson. I didn't know her story. That the Holy Spirit just brought me to this thing, and I started following this path, and it took me to this amazing story of this woman and the feminine influence at that time. We don't, when I went to school for this, I learned about Thoreau, I learned about Emerson, I learned about Emma Curtis Hopkins and Mary Baker Eddy, but like, I didn't, there wasn't like the real founding ideas that brought up this conversation. And it's kind of nice to learn that. It's kind of nice to have more mentors, more diverse mentors. And I appreciate that. I just appreciate it. And always, though, to go back to like, what does this mean for me? And when, man, I could talk about this all day. So I'm going to stop talking because I know some other people want to share. I could go down the rabbit hole, around the block and back again.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Maureen, on this holiday weekend for really lifting up people of all walks that were brave enough to speak their truth, especially in times where not only was it not welcomed, but not safe. And, and still carving that path. And I just want to say, express gratitude to Speakeasy for being a haven of lifting people up in their own walks, and that we can walk together in speaking our own truths. So just feeling really grateful to be rooted in a community that encourages this new thought, that encourages our thought, and what we uniquely bring to the conversation. So feeling really grateful for that today. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for being a part of that, And thanks for knowing, that the reason sometimes new thoughts go back into hiding is because they're not embraced right away. Sometimes, many times, new ideas, new concepts, new experiences, they need to be an acquired taste. So think about the first time when you were immersed in a philosophy or theology or culture that said like gay people are bad, and you were immersed in that, and you're like, you're gay, that's a bad thing. And then you began to say, wait, no, this is not true, and then this is not true, and then this is not true. It took a little bit of undoing this new thought. When we began to see diversity in television, at first it was shocking to people, and then it was like, wait, no, this is right. So truth can sometimes seem scary at first. So we get to be compassionate with each other as we move towards these truths, but it can be an awkward entrance for these new ideas. The best thing to do, though, is not to run and hide, but just get curious. Be willing to be brave enough to be curious. I don't know everything. I'm still learning. That does not make me a bad person. You wanted to share, Mary?
That statement has helped me so much over the years. I'm still learning, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm wrong."
Yeah.
Thank you, Maureen, and just blessings and gratitude to this entire community for being what it is, a place where we can talk about such revolutionary ideas. I carried around that book, Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, for decades. And I only got through a few pages of it. And I always thought that it was self-reliance in the physical sense, because I knew he went out into the forest and was self-reliant in a physical way. So I never really I didn't read the whole thing, but I read about him. I like to know the author and get to know the speaker really before I read the work. And so what I read about him is that he studied Hinduism.
Yes, he did.
And he was a follower of Hinduism. So that idea of pantheism and the idea of oneness, many of the ideas actually that we learn about in A Course in Miracles, that who's the channeler of A Course in Miracles?
Helen Schuckman.
Helen Schuckman's mother was a part of a group called that studied Hinduism and other early thinking. But I just want to bring out that I appreciate on this Independence weekend that we have such a independent thinker as our founder and director, and that we can all be that. And not only are you an independent thinker, Maureen, you have the courage to speak out with your voice, but you dedicate your life to hearing other people's independent thinking. You encourage us to go within and see what comes out, and to you've dedicated your life to helping other people find their voice. One of the things you asked us to do for Maiden Voyage, which I'm a part of, is have a declaration statement. And so I have one on my wall, and mine says, I am Mary, I am a woman, I am a woman of light and love, and I am 100% responsible for my capital S self. And you've just helped me to embrace that and even more. So thanks so much for being here and for speaking, and thanks everybody.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. Yeah, again, so scary to find our voice. I mean, look at our history. And this, we have men and women in our community, but we have a high percentage of women. Rare to find a space that is encouraging spiritual authority. It's more common now, but we're coming through a lot of scar tissue, and we could say, yeah, we've made so much progress, but have we? And there's still many glass ceilings before us in the realm of equality in form, and we're working on having equality in thought and in consciousness. So it's important for us to honor the feminine perspective, and for men, the men who are here, to be able to sit by the fire of a feminine perspective and not run, but just allow that to awaken in themselves, like that which is also in all forms, is gorgeous. It's really generous. It's really gorgeous. And I can't say I take credit for it, because I don't think I have another choice. You don't have a choice. You just do what you do. So I'll pass.
Thanks, Maureen. You are inspiring, and we really appreciate what you bring. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And just around your whole passion around using voice and bringing that to light. It's like, I happen to have a book here. It's called Prayers of Honoring Your Voice. Really beautiful, and has all of these prompts in it. Anyway, synchronicities, and passing this back to Tembra for another beautiful song to close out this amazing, powerful speakeasy experience once again.
I wanted to say one other thing. If you were here today and you liked this content, we're doing a whole month of honoring our roots and wings. We have amazing teachers. Todd Fink, Megan Lassman. There's a gorgeous teacher who's coming next week to go deeper with our Irish culture. I mean, it's going to be a gorgeous series. So be sure to get here and bring your friends. That's all.
And one more thought too, to add on, is that I just want to honor everybody who showed up and spoke what they needed to speak today, because right there, you're speaking your truth, and this is a really safe place to do that. So keep doing it. And it's like 12 steps, keep coming back. So, okay, Tembra, now it's your turn. Thank you for closing us out today with your voice.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to do a song called Walk Towards the Light, and it has the word darkness in it. And sometimes I kind of struggle with that word, because I think sometimes it's not good to exclude everything, is it? And sometimes I suppose the words are walk towards the light, don't let the darkness in. But so maybe darkness can mean different things for you. It could just be negative thoughts or feeling like you can't or something like that. So, it isn't my song, but I kind of like to change it slightly and kind of give a different perspective on it. So it's by Louise Blackburn. It's called Walk Towards the Light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. So I'm going to sing it for you. It goes. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Maybe you could join us. Oh, look at Maureen's lovely view. Maybe you could join in and sing that with us. So from the beginning it goes, walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. So I think what's really lovely about this is that online singing is where you get to actually sing, and even if you're a bit nervous about your voice, you still get to sing and we can't hear you. The bonus of online singing. There's another part that goes over the top that might move you a bit more. It goes, deep within my soul, deep within my heart, deep within my soul, deep within my heart, deep within my soul, deep within my heart. One more time. Deep within my soul, deep within my heart. So I'm going to put those two together and you can choose what you want to sing. It might be a third thing where it's anything you want to sing all together. So from the beginning it goes. walk. Oh, it's not coming through. 1 second. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within. And if you want to do the other part, it comes in here. Deep within my soul. Deep within my heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within my peace within my soul. Peace towards the light. Peace within my soul. Peace within my heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within my heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Peace within my soul. Peace within my heart. Walk towards the light. Peace within my soul. Peace within my heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within your heart. Walk towards the light. Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within my heart. Walk towards the light. Deep within my soul. Deep within my heart. Last time, what's the light? Don't let the darkness in. Carry love deep within my heart. Hope that carries for you for the day.
Thank you, Tembra. Thank you, thank you. And thank you everyone who came to Speakeasy today. Happy Independence Day tomorrow. Happy Independence Weekend. Enjoy all the playfulness. Look up in the sky, see God, see all those beautiful lights, the stars, the fireworks. And peace be with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Regina. Thanks,